Hey, how you doing, folks? This is Hellbent, and today we're going to be doing a tutorial lecture on image search in Autohotkey. This command allows you to select an image that you have on your computer somewhere in a file somewhere, for example, a PNG or whatever, and actually check to see if that image matches something on the screen or in a web application, etc., etc. Anything that you want to match. So let's say if you're doing a game, you could take an image off of the game, put that into a PNG or something like that, and then later on write a script that will allow you to check to see if that particular image is on the screen, and if it is, you can do endless amounts of things with it. I'm not going to be going too much into the kinds of things that you can do if you find that image on your screen. That's all about what you want your program to do. But I'm going to show you how to set everything up, explain all the the context of looking for everything, and actually how to get the results that you want. That said, there's things that I don't know about this because I only have access to one computer. So there's things like what happens, does it behave the exact same way if you were to perhaps share with somebody else that's using a different computer with a different resolution or things like that. I can't answer those kind of questions because I can't do testing for it, and without the ability to actually test, I'll just be talking out of my ass, and I try not to do that. Okay, with that out of the way, I'm going to be using a special tool for this, and this tool is available for anyone who wants a copy of it. It's a really good tool to have, so if you don't already have it, I suggest you pick it up. It's a screen clipping tool which allows you to take basically drag your cursor over a section of the screen and create images from it. Let me give you an example. So there's two basic hotkeys that I can do. One will allow me to create an image that just stays up on my screen. Apparently I closed the program. Okay, so let me run it again. Okay, so if I do one, it'll allow me to drag and create this image that I can keep up on my desktop, and I can create multiple of them and have them stacked on top of each other, etc., etc. But the other thing that we're going to be using in this is it actually has the ability to create and save a PNG, and also allows you to upload to a image hosting site, specifically in this example Image Garage or Imgur or whatever you call it. So I'll show you an example of that. So if I press another hotkey, instead of it creating that image that stays on the screen, it's actually creating a PNG, and it's loading into my it also uploaded that image to the image hosting site, and it also put the URL into my clipboard. So now if I want to share that with somebody, all I have to do is Control V, and there's the image. Like I said, but I can also actually come over here, and if I put that up here, there we go. You can see what I just did, and it automatically did that for me. I didn't have to do anything. Okay, so like I said, this is the tool that I'm going to be using, and the reason why I'm going to be using it is because it allows me to quickly put things into my search or define what I'm going to be looking for. I do have references to it in some of my videos, so if you would like to get a copy of it, I'm not going to be looking up what the link is and everything because I've done it all before, but if you go to my video page and in the search part, if you type in something like clipper tool or clipping tool, or screen clipper or things like that, you should get some results, and in those videos I'll reference you to where you can actually find that program, the script, to actually do that. I will explain it though in a way that if you're not using something like that, you'll still be able to follow along. You just won't have the ability to switch images on the fly like I'm going to be able to do. So let's go over that quickly. If you're not using that, if you want to get an image, perhaps you have a file that you already have that you want to look for. Perhaps you don't. If you don't, just create a screenshot and then crop the screenshot down to a size of basically containing only what you're going to be looking for. Right? If you don't know how to do that, I'm sure there's a billion tutorials on how to take a screenshot. This isn't that. But basically what you want to do is create a file, perhaps a JPEG, a PNG. PNG I find are a little bit better than JPEGs, but whatever you want. Like I said, this program does that for me. So when I create this image here, it actually gets loaded into a PNG called example, and each time I create a new one, it overrides the previous version of it. So it's constantly, each time I do that, example PNG is getting overwritten with the new value. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the directory. Now, I've taken a copy of that screen clipping tool. Currently I have two copies of it. One copy is where I always have it, where I can always get access to it, but I also created a copy of it to put inside of this image search tutorial folder. So the folder that contains this image search tutorial, I've also placed a copy of it in there, and that's the copy that I'm using right now. So that way when it creates the PNG, it automatically creates that PNG inside of the folder that this tutorial is in. In other words, I would have to specify the path to that image in a long way that I don't want to have to do. So to make it easier on myself, perhaps if you want to do it, make it easier on yourself, put a copy of the screen clipping tool in that to use. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's jump into the code. Now there's a whole bunch of things that I have to talk about, I have to set up in the beginning, because this, even before we actually start using the image search, there's a whole bunch of things that we need to set up. And just like you, when you create your script, you're not just looking for an image. There's other things that, like, are you pressing a hotkey to start that, or is it automatically happening? Do you have to open up a window? Do you have to do this? Do you have to do that? There's all kinds of setup. So there's a bunch of setup that I need to do. And I'm a very slow typer, so I created a tool a little while ago to actually help me get through these a little bit. So I'm going to load that. And this has my setup and everything. So normally you're not going to see this kind of thing, but because I'm going to be using the whole screen for this tutorial, normally I would have it down here and then I'd only be recording the screen above it. But for this one, because I'm going to be doing image search throughout the whole screen, you're going to have to see this. But don't be distracted by it. It's just a simple tool that I've created to allow me to create tutorials and go through them a little bit quicker while still talking about everything. So I'm going to load up my my image search tutorial, and let's begin. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of setup, and the first line is, let me make sure this is enabled, is single instance force, which means that as I run the program over and over and over again, it doesn't ask me if I want to close the previous version to run the new version. Next thing, I'm going to create a hotkey to exit the script at any time I want, so if any trouble happens, I can hit escape, boom, it's done. Then now we're going to do some setup. Now, because I have the image actually in the folder that this script is in, I don't need to actually specify the working directory. But if I have something like this program right here that allows me to launch other scripts, programs, windows, applications, web pages, blah blah blah, then because that program is doing it, I would need to have the working directory. So the working directory is just saying that wherever the script is, if I include any text documents or any images, etc., in my script, it knows that even if I don't specify the path to that file, it knows that the path is supposed to be whatever path to this script is, which happens to be Autohotkey Tutorials, image search, and then there's a whole bunch of other things behind that. There's C drive, blah blah blah, blah blah blah, blah blah blah, right? But it's just basically the whole path up to this folder. So I've set that as my working directory, so now I can use images that are in that folder without having to specify what their path is. So if you're using an image that isn't directly in the folder that you're using, then you're going to have to specify the whole path to it. And if you don't know how to do that, what you can do is go to the file, the image that you want, right click on it, go to its properties at the very bottom, and then once you're in the properties, if you go to security, one of the top lines in the security field will be the path to that image, and you can use that full path instead of having it inside of your actual directory. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the chord mode for the mouse to be the screen rather than a window. So it's going to use the whatever X and Y coordinates I'm using, it's related to the screen rather than a particular window or the particular client area of a window. And because we're using image search, which uses pixels, I'm also going to do the same thing with pixel. So chord mode, pixel, screen. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little interface that for this tutorial, it's not going to be that inclusive, like it's not going to have a whole bunch of options on it, but perhaps if I come back to this sometime later on down the road, we can build upon it. But I'm going to create a little GUI with 2 buttons that's going to help us launch certain things, so that way we don't have to worry about hotkeys, because I hate having to memorize hotkeys. You might not, I do, so that's why I'm going to do this. So I'm going to say GUI 2 always on top, which means that this little GUI I'm going to create always stays on top of everything. I'm going to add in a button, and this button is going to be attached to a subroutine that is going to trigger our find the image. So later on we're going to set it up so that way when we press this button, that's going to trigger the script to actually look for the image and do whatever we want it to do. The next button is I'm going to create another little GUI that's going to have the image that we're looking for. So it's kind of like a test environment. So rather than us going to a web page or whatever, we're going to have a little GUI that actually has that. So no matter what, it's always going to be at our fingertips. Next, I'm going to put some text on the screen because maybe I'm running this a week from now, 2 weeks from now. I want to include the hotkey that I'm going to be using to stop the script. So that way if I forget, it's there on the little GUI. And you'll see what I mean later on. I'm just going to show it. I'm going to put it so that way it's over here somewhere. Actually, you know what I forgot to do? I don't want this tutorial to get too long. But this other window is going to be somewhere about here when we show it. And last, I'm going to add in a return. Once I'm done that, because I've named this GUI GUI2, I've named it 2. To do the normal GUI close when I hit the red button, I need to specify which GUI it is before the name of the GUI label, the GUI close label. So GUI2 close. So when I create this GUI here, it's going to have that little red button on it. When I press that, it's going to exit the script. If you don't like me explaining all this stuff, then I'm not the right person to be teaching you this, because my main focus is on people that aren't familiar with this stuff. So I spend extra time explaining everything that I do. So if that's not to your liking, goodbye. See you later. Okay, next thing is up here we added a label that when we press our little button that we're going to be creating, it's going to trigger our find image. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to create that label, but I'm not going to put anything in it until we're done with everything else. So I'm just going to create the label, and I'm going to immediately put a return. So it's out of the way, so I can run the script now without it erroring out. Actually, I still have this to add in, but once I have that, it won't error out. So that's why I'm adding this in for now. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little function that's going to build the second GUI, which is actually going to contain the image that we're going to use to do our testing with. So I'm just going to create a little function, and inside of this function, because I have a button up here that's going to load or reload this over and over again, what's going to happen is if it already exists on the screen and I reload it again, I'm going to get errors because it's trying to create the same variables over and over again. So what I need to do first is destroy that GUI if it already exists. I could do it another way, but this is the way I prefer to do it. So I'm just going to, if it doesn't exist, nothing's going to happen. If it does exist, it's going to destroy it, and then now we can build it again. I'm going to set the margin to 0, 0, so that way when we create this GUI, it doesn't have any border around it. Next, I'm going to set the options for the GUI. I'm going to make it always on top. I'm going to remove all the caption, all this border stuff around it, and I'm going to set the owner to be the first GUI. Even though in this case it doesn't actually need this, I could just set it to owner. But basically another thing that it's going to do is when I create this first GUI, it's going to create something like this, whatever you call these down here. I don't want the second one to do that. I don't want to have two of those things down here, whatever you call them. So by including owner 2, it's the only one that's going to show up is the first one. But there's other reasons why you do that, but that's not what this tutorial is about. Next, I'm going to add the image. So like I said, every time because I'm using that clipping tool, every time I create an, oops, I did wrong key. Every time I create an image, it's updating into a PNG that I have that's called example PNG. And because I'm using set working directory, and because this is in that directory, I don't need to specify anything else. Otherwise, I would have to have its full path written here before I put in example PNG. Let me show you just in case you're confused. If I come to the image that I want to use, if I right click on it, I go down to properties, and then if I go over to security, right up at the top, I can see the full path. And if I didn't have the working directory, or if I didn't have this image in the actual folder, I would actually have to specify the full path, and this is what that looks like, right? But I don't want to type out all this, so I'm using setting the working directory so it's done out of the way. Okay, so that's the image. I positioned it at this is going to be its own GUI, so I've set the image to be the top left corner, x0, y0. I've given it a variable name, but you notice I haven't given it a width and a height, and I'm just going to let whatever size of the image that I create, whatever size it is, I'm going to let that decide. So it's going to make this however big that is. Next thing I'm going to do is also add this to a label that later on when we do our program, if we interact, if we click on this window, we're going to make it move to a new location. And this is going to make it easier to do our testing. Now what I need to do is, because certain other things in my program, they're not going to know how big this image is, because I'm going to be dynamically adding new images whenever I want. Because of that, I need to actually get how big the image is programmatically, because I can't just type in that it has a width of 100, height of 50, because this image here definitely does not have a width of 50, height of 100, or whatever I said it was, right? So I'm going to instead, as soon as it creates this picture control, I'm going to get the size of that image by using GUI control get. This position here is just a variable. I could have called this anything I want, but when I was first learning this a long time ago, this was a common thing that I would see, so I stuck with that. The second thing is the command that I'm going to be using, and I also include the name of the window. So you see I've named it GUI1, GUI1, GUI1. So the command I'm going to be doing is the name of the GUI, and then the command is position. So I'm going to be getting the position. Now what this returns is, after I get it, it's going to take this position variable here, and it's going to create like 4 copies of it. One is going to be POSX for the X position, POSY for the Y position, POSW for the width, POSH for the height. So all that information is going to have its X position, its Y position, its width, and its height. But all we need is its width and its height later on. I'm also specifying which control I'm trying to get the position of, which is the name that I gave this up here. Oops, my bad. I pressed paste. I don't want to paste. Because now that we have all that, all I have to do is just show the GUI, let it auto size itself. I don't even think I need to put in auto size here, but I did it just anyways. But I think I could just leave that blank and it would do whatever it wants, because I set the margin to 0, so I think it should be okay. And then I can just close this off. Okay, now that we have this, what we can do is I'm going to create another subroutine up here, which gets triggered whenever I right click on this GUI here. So if I right click on this GUI when it creates it, all I want to do is just destroy it, get it out of the way, because perhaps it's blocking the screen or whatever and I'm trying to do something, right? I don't want to exit the script, I just want that to disappear for a while. So if I right click on that image, it'll just get rid of it for a while. So the way I do that is access the context menu, which is when you right click on a particular GUI. And because this is the GUI one, I don't actually have to specify a name before it like I did up here. But if I was doing this for this one up here, I would actually put a 2 before it. So if I want to do something when I right click on this GUI, I would put a 2 before this GUI context menu. And like I said, all I want to happen if I right click on this GUI here is just destroy it. Get rid of it so it's not on my screen. Because remember, I have a button up here that allows me to reload it over and over again. So me destroying this is not a big deal because I can just come up here, press this button, and it'll reload it. And then return. We're done. Okay. Like I said, our script is going to be using this find image. And whatever we do, we're going to be eventually doing clicks with it. So what we're going to do is, if we are running our script and we click on this GUI here, if we click on this GUI here, we're going to get it to move to another random position. So basically, this GUI here is just the image. So whatever image it is, if we click on it, it's going to move to a new random location. So we can just test how our script behaves if we have moving images or multiple things that it's targeting, etc. So we're going to say if we click on it, we're going to move the window, and the way we're going to do that is just by using 2 random numbers. So the first one is getting a new random X position for it, and all I've done is set that it can be anywhere from 0 for the X-axis all the way up to the width minus the width of this image. So whatever, if this image is 100 pixels, the position would be like right here, so it could sit right there. So it'll never be out of the screen. It'll always be in the screen. And then I'm doing the same with the Y. So it can be anywhere from 0 all the way down to the bottom of the screen minus the height of the image. And then I'm going to actually move that GUI to that new location. And then that's it for that. Later on, we're going to be having this inside of our image search inside of a loop, and we're going to need a way of exiting that loop. So what we'll do now is, just in case we forget later on, we're going to put down here, we're going to put a hotkey that's going to allow us to stop our loop without just making our computer go crazy, making us have to exit, etc. So if I press number pad 1, it's going to change the value of a variable that we're going to use later on called stop, and we're going to change its value to 1. And then we're going to return. Let me move that out of the way. So it's just a hotkey. If I press number pad 1, it's going to change the value of a variable to 1, and then done. Inside of our image search, we're going to have it that if the value of it is 1, we're going to exit, which I'll go into now. So this is our program. I think I actually have enough here that we can actually take a look at this without doing our image search program. So as I said, every time I can create an image just by drawing over it like this, and this gets saved to a PNG, and then when I hit this button here, it's going to load this GUI here that contains that image. So this is that image. I've also attached this to the move subroutine that when I click on this, it's going to move to a new random location. Now this is a little bit hard for you to see, so what I'll do is I'll take perhaps a little piece of this, and I'll use this as the image. And now I can just reload, and this image will get replaced with that. So there we go. So this is the image we're going to be looking for, but it could be anything I want. I can do that if I want. Okay, so that's that. Now we're going to actually go on to how can we find this image. We know what the image is that we're looking for. How can we find this on our screen somewhere? So that's what we're going to talk about now. First, starting with the actual syntax of the image search command. So I'm going to get rid of, like I said, if I want to get rid of this because it's in my way, all I have to do is use the GUI context menu, which is to right click on this, and boom, it's gone. It's still there. I mean, the program's still running, just that it's that particular GUI is gone. Okay, so this is the syntax for our image search, and it's structured very much like the pixel search, if you're familiar with that, where we have a output variable X and output variable Y, a starting position of where we're going to be searching on our screen, that's these two values, so it'll be these two values. Let's say if I want to start from up here, it would be 0, 0. So X1 would be 0, Y1 would be 0. If I want to search my whole screen, I would specify how wide my screen is and how tall my screen is, or how high my screen is. If I only want to search a little bit of the screen, so let's say if I want to search from here over to here, I would start with 0, 0, and I would the X2 and Y2 would be this point right here. So I'm checking to see, does the image exist within this little area? But we're going to be using the whole screen, so that's what we're going to set it up as. So this is what it looks like when we actually set it up. And now, from now on, I'm going to be typing everything out by hand. So I'm at the end of the setup list, so I can get rid of this. So now that's off the screen. Okay, so once again, I've taken the image search and I've created an output variable X. So if it finds our image, it's going to take the X position of it and put it into this variable here. So if it finds the image, let's say right up at 0, 0, it'll put a 0 in the X position, and it'll put a 0 in the Y position. Next is, what portion of my screen am I searching? In my case, I'm going to be searching the whole screen. So that is 0, 0 to begin with, which is this top corner, and then there's built-in variables that can grab the resolution of my screen and tell me what it is just by typing this built-in command. So a screen width contains how wide my screen is, and a screen height contains how high my screen is. If you have a different resolution than mine, using these two variables will get what yours is, not what mine is. Okay, so I'm going to be searching from this corner down to this corner, so basically the whole screen. The next thing is the where the image is, or what the file that I'm going to be using. And like I said, because I'm using the setting the working directory to be the script directory, I don't need anything except for the name of the file, and the name of the file is example.png. If I was, like I said, if I'm using from some other location on my computer, I need to specify where that is. And that is it. We're past 15 minutes, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue on in a part 2. So that way, if you don't have time to watch it all in one day, you can come back for part 2. And I will see you guys there.